Summer is here, and that means it's time for summer events at Serenbe. Throughout June and July, join us every weekend for live music Fridays on the farmhouse porch, the Saturday farmers market and farm tours, a bevy of weekend wine tastings, goat yoga, and you can tour our furnished model homes. We also have lots of special events, which include multiple film screenings hosted by the Art Farm, a floral arranging class at Serenbe Farms, and of course, the annual Chat Hills 4th of July parade. Head to the events calendar in our show notes to learn more. We'd love to see you this summer in Serenbe. A couple of years ago, during early COVID, Garnie Nygren and I sat down with our friend Tony Triumph for a conversation all about building the Serenbe brand. Tony is the founder and CEO of the Triumphant Group, a New York-based marketing agency that has worked with major brands such as Nordstrom's, Kettle Vodka, Hyatt Hotels, just to name a few. In this conversation, Garnie and I talk with Tony about how Serenbe has grown from a crazy idea that no one thought would work to the thriving wellness community it is today. We also share how we both juggle living and working in Serenbe, how residents have helped shape the community over the years, and we take a glimpse into our day-to-day lives building this place and building the brand that we've been so passionate about for years.
I think whenever you start something with intention and authenticity, you end up falling into something, right? It's not because you just say like, I want to build a wellness community. So unbeknownst to us, right? Wellness was absolutely one of the underlying principles of something we were creating in Serenbe. And we were doing it naturally because we have the organic farm. We have 15 miles of walking trails. We have built-in community. We have fresh air. So it was beginning to layer in those services that support that holistic wellness lifestyle.
You're listening to Building a Better Brand, and I'm your host, Tony Triumph, founder of the Triumphant Group. And I'm here to share the stories behind my friends who are industry innovators, my buddies who are movers and shakers, as well as my fellow clients, colleagues, and the go-getters of today that have helped both big and little brands be a big success. Whether you're a big brand, a little brand, an indie brand, or run a multi-million-dollar company, I'd love for you to listen up, because we're here to empower you through our world of tips and tools to help you build a better brand. Welcome to our world. Our next guest on Building a Better Brand hail from the fresh hills of Palmetto, Georgia, enjoying life and work from a quaint but buzzing town called Serenbe. Garnie Nygren, who is the eldest daughter of Serenbe's founder Steve Nygren, serves as their director of operations at Serenbe and is an ambitious multi-entrepreneur creating brands that have aligned with and continue to elevate the Serenbe vision. We'll also speak with Monica Olsen, a resident of Serenbe, as well as their chief marketing officer, both joining me today to discuss what it's like to build and run a well-branded and now well-known wellness community, as well as what it's like to build sub-brands around this community, including lots of sustainability-focused products, activities, and experiences that have attracted people from all over the world to join their community and commit to biophilic living. Serenbe was born in an effort to protect the beautiful rural land just outside of Atlanta known as Chattahoochee Country. An illustrious community of thriving citizens, it now serves as a haven for those seeking sanctuaries away from the bustling city life, yet lust for the bountifulness of a clean and urban zen within nature. In this episode of Building a Better Brand, we'll be talking about all things that revolve around the building of sustainable brands, the future of biophilic living, green zones, and why wellness is such an important part of brand building in general. This is the perfect episode as we continue to explore new ways to live better while we build better. Listen up, y'all. Thank you for joining me today, Monica and Garnie. What a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Of course, absolutely. So before we get into the nitty gritty of your day-to-day and all the fun, cool work that you do at Serenbe, kind of give me the breakdown of the Serenbe legacy. I mean, when I first discovered Serenbe, I was like, what is this back of the woods place that, people want me to come check out? What am I getting myself into? Are there going to be parties, or is this just going to be campfires and kumbaya, But then obviously I discovered, because I've been quite a few times now, that it's way more to the story than that. Give us the breakdown of the story that has brought all of these experiences together. Garnie and Monica, give me your breakdown of the Serenbe story.
Absolutely. And I always say that I think Serenbe's legacy absolutely started as it's my family's project. Started from the place of as a family in the early 90s, looking for that place of respite and getaway and reconnecting to each other and to yourself. And so we found that the land and the place was where we found that peace and serenity, right? That sometimes we find ourselves so aggressively chasing on the treadmill of life. And so after spending about 10 years being here on what we affectionately called the farm, my dad, Steve, realized that this place where we found all of that peace and serenity was soon going to be surrounded by the sprawl of Metro Atlanta. And that set him into just fear and devastation of why is it that the real estate community, when building and when development comes, really the only thing that happens is all of the trees get cut down, right? Land gets mass graded, and effectively we just destroy the built environment. And so he went out seeking a model that did not exist, right? And so became the model to say, really has turned into two main things that has turned into a comprehensive lifestyle. But what's the model where development can save green space, that you can have development and trees and balance? And then how do we intentionally think about how the built environment and development can be a positive add to life, so that when someone tells you that somebody's about to build a neighborhood a mile down the road, your knee-jerk response isn't to say our quality of life is about to be destroyed, but more so that our quality of life is about to be enhanced. In the year that he spent kind of looking for somebody to bring back here, there was no one who was in the United States fundamentally building what he was looking for and who was matching kind of those two intentions. So I think very much Serenbe's legacy is to be a place and an example of those two things, of how development can be in harmony and in balance with Mother Nature, and how through the built-in environment we can add to people's quality of life and be a benefit versus detracting.
That is an amazing what is the why. It's a big buzzword right now. A lot of people work on building brands and start projects, and they really just fall in love with it for so many different reasons, but you really have to move with that word intention that I heard you use quite a few times. I think the thing that sold me the most was when I sat down and had dinner with, I think it was all of us, you, your sisters, Monica, Steve, your mom, and then you just the story just rolls off everyone's tongue. And I'm like, wow, how? So you tell me your perspective, Monica, because you are just as much of a Serenbe ambassador as the Nygren family. So how did you meet Serenbe? How did you join the crew? How did you start working at Serenbe? I mean, I know you have a lot of branding and marketing experience, and you're the director of marketing now.
My family lives here, and my husband and two boys, and we've been here for, over maybe 11 years now. So at the time we moved in, it didn't feel like we were the early sort of people moving in. There were probably 110 people, but I look back now and realize, obviously that was a very sort of special time. We just stumbled upon Serenbe. We both grew up in California, and we stumbled upon it sort of looking for a place that was very connected to the outdoors. We didn't really feel like Atlanta had that. You could go to the mountains, but that just didn't feel quite what we wanted. And then the beach was way too far away from Atlanta. This is pre-Beltline. Really Atlanta wasn't the city that it is today. I mean, we moved here to Atlanta about 20 years ago. Stumbled upon it, really did a birthday party at the Stables with at that time, our 4-year-old, and sort of fell in love. And just, we were going to build, we had plans to build in Atlanta up and back in our house. We were in a cute little historic neighborhood, Grant Park, and stumbled upon here and ended up deciding instead of doing the renovation, we would buy a second down here. And that would be our way to kind of get out of the city and have some time in nature and let the kids run free a little bit more, not really understanding what this was. It just seemed like a really good idea. And basically we moved in for the summer thinking we'd go back to Atlanta. and kind of never did. So that's sort of how we got here. And then, when there's only 110 people, you start to have relationships with, the whole family, right? Because they are embedded in the community. They live here, and that is very unusual for a developer. Most developers sort of build it and get out because, it's a pretty tenuous relationship. Like as you're building this to also live in it, you're going to get feedback constantly and you're really living the vision. And so became really good friends with all of them on my own. And one day Garnie kind of came to me and was like, Steven, I want you to do our PR. And I sort of resisted that for a bit because I lived here and I didn't really want to cross that boundary, but ended up doing a little bit and then a little bit more. And here we are, I don't know, probably 7 years later, I've been working for them. The interesting thing where you say, the story rolls off the Nygrens' tongues. And as a brand person, the reason that is because it's a real story, right? So there's this very authentic, it's actually what happened. And so much in branding is you are creating a brand and you're creating a narrative and a storytelling. And that is your job, right? Even from the naming of something, like I was at Old Navy in the early days, which was the Gap brand. And so there's a story there, but you're sort of putting a surround to it as a marketer and everything you do versus here, it was very ground up or grassroots. So that's been a huge benefit for me is you don't have to, the thing is already here. And so now you just need to amplify the vision, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I would love to know as we talk about your jobs, and I love that you mentioned, the building of the brand aspect, Monica. But Garnie, I know you both do so much. I mean, and we'll get into that. I mean, I know you guys have like a store together, like you sit on multiple boards. Garnie, you have a bamboo juice company, you do the real estate. So tell me, what is your day-to-day like at Serenbe? Like, how do you blend work, play, community, family? What are the logistics of living where you work? How do you balance it all out, embracing the good, preventing the bad?
I'm a big believer that we all create our own boundaries and our own balance, right? It's rarely handed to us, even though some people want it to be. And so Serenbe, the people that live here are hugely respectful of people's personal times. And so like if I'm out and about at the farmer's market or in a yoga class, and sometimes a neighbor will kind of cross that like, okay, Garnie's clearly in personal time with her 2-year-old and I'm going to ask a question. I'll just kind of smile and say, call me on Monday. And people get it, right? They get and understand like, oh, that's right. Like you live here too, and you need to enjoy living here and being here. I think one of the beautiful things about when you're doing something that you love is that it can be all consuming, but it's all consuming in a positive way and something that you want to be all consuming because you so much believe in what you're doing and that it's changing people's lives, that all consuming isn't overwhelming. Instead, it's something that you welcome. And then a massive benefit in terms of time, work-life balance of Serenbe is we've really worked to bring all of the things that we want to enjoy in life and love about life into the neighborhood. So therefore, like I don't have to spend, 30 minutes like traveling, walking, driving, depending on the city that you live in, to a yoga class, right? Like there's a phenomenal yoga studio in the neighborhood. There are restaurants, there are trails, there's neighborhoods. So you get a tremendous amount of time back, especially as you look at people who just live in Metro Atlanta, of not having to spend those hours every day and every week getting to the things that we call life, right? Life is in Serenbe. And so you have hours and hours back in your life. And we've been very intentional about bringing some of those things here. And then some things other people in the neighborhood have brought and have been intentional that we never would have thought of. I'll joke with people and have a big smile on my face and say, like, you don't have to leave. And they kind of look at me like, that is so bizarre. And I'm like, oh, okay, you don't understand yet, right? Like when I say you don't have to leave, it's in such a positive way.
Yeah, you're not trapped.
Yeah.
So I saw, I don't think I've ever spent a weekend at Serenbe where I ran out of stuff to do. It was always like, oh man, I came down because, my whole narrative was this is the perfect escape for a beat down New Yorker. But Monica was like, oh, Tony, it's no sleeping this weekend. We're partying. We got so much to do. I just love that you said you get your hours back. So describe your daily journeys as in your roles. I'll start with you, Monica. What is your day to day like as CMO?
Obviously, it's changed, but I'll touch on just branding again for a minute, that whatever brand you're working for, and I've worked on a lot of different brands, some that I utilized and some that I didn't, and some that believed in but really didn't buy. I think that comes through in the marketing, and I think that comes through in how it's presented by the people who represent it, right? And so they have to have a passion for the brand, right? And so you don't have to live here to market Serenbe, but I think for me, it helps to lead the team to really have been integrated into, all the different groups at Serenbe, from like being a mom. I used to bring my clients here, having a business, having relationships with people on the artist in residency board, or helping to build a charter school. All of those perspectives give me all these different nuances that let me do exactly what you just said and have it feel seamless, right? So usually I would be in the office most of the day and then running around doing tours or making phone calls, approving creative, nothing kind of out of the ordinary from any other marketing person. But I think what's been interesting about is a little bit of the work from home. I feel like I have more time now to do the work because I can pop out of bed and still be kind of a mess and get on a Zoom call with my team.
I think another key word is flow. And that's one thing I noticed, because you do live in Serenbe and you each do multiple things there. Like, for instance, you, Garnie, I know you have the Bamboo Juice. You are the GM at the Inn. You are the director of operations. You sit on a couple of boards, I think, at Serenbe Playhouse. And then you two, do you still have your store together? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. But the beautiful thing is that I teach on the 4 Ps: platforms, partnerships, products, and projects. And essentially what they do is they allow everything that you do when you do multiple things to just be put in a flow to where you don't get burned out. Garnie, from what I noticed, it seems like everything that you do kind of supports the next thing.
Yeah, without question. So like my life happens based on a calendar, and a lot of it is like set weekly times with people. And within those weekly times, being really, really disciplined throughout the week, not to like have conversations via email. If I'm thinking about something, I'll email it to somebody who I know I have a standing like Wednesday meeting with and say, here's an agenda item for Wednesday. Don't respond. We don't need to talk about it back and forth until Wednesday, but so that I don't forget, add this to our weekly agenda. I personally find that you're able to get so much more done efficiently on both sides, right? Like whatever the team you're leading and then the team that's operating, if you're not having these email conversations throughout the week, but instead kind of working through action items and an ongoing like agenda and checklist.
Mm-hmm. And I'll piggyback on like tools, right? Having a good tool like a calendar. We've used something called Basecamp for a number of years, our team and the marketing team. And it has come into play so much more with sort of this nobody's together, really. I mean, we try and see each other here and there, but that is a tool that's basically a productivity tool where you can put projects in and to-dos. And that's amazing too. And it cuts down on that email back and forth. I can just put the to-do in. I can tag somebody, give the responsibility to somebody, and then give them the due date. And that's super helpful in general, but we've really started utilizing that. And I feel like that's really upped our efficiency over the past sort of 6 months, or really with COVID happening. It has realigned and made us rethink of what's the most important thing that we need to do. And so I think it's given us time to sort of say, what are the really important tactics and tools in marketing that we need to use, as well as I'm sure operationally, what's really important.
Right.
I like the efficiency word. That's super important. A lot of people don't realize that productivity is counterproductive if you are not efficient. So those are some amazing tools that you've just shared. Thank you. So let's talk motto. Serenbe's newest community, the idea of blending young adults and senior citizens. I'm pretty sure it's much more to it than that, but that was my biggest takeaway when I came down and observed. It was still under construction. I think you had just broken ground. We had just flown in and we were just doing a quick little mini tour with Monica. And I was just like, man, like they don't waste time here. Like I was just here last year and there was nothing. All this was trees. So like, tell us, how's Motto going? Where does this add to the Serenbe legacy? What was the idea behind it?
Well, one, you need to come back because I think that since you've been here last, it's probably like even doubled.
Oh, and more than
or
that.
tripled.
I mean,
it's almost basically it's done. So yeah, which is wild. So I think that, where motto, the idea for motto came from, and motto is a Creek Indian word that means things in balance. And so when we first started Serenbe, right, and Selborne, our first neighborhood, motto is our third neighborhood, we had the word spa on the back of a commercial building in the middle of Selborne. And for like years and years, people would come up to us, come into the real estate office, like approach my dad or on the street. And from that single word, they would begin articulating like what Serenbe meant to them in terms of wellness and their overall like personal health journey. So whether it was something they wanted to bring to Serenbe or something that they thought should be at Serenbe or something that Serenbe was already doing for them. And so we were listening and paying attention to these little nuggets. And we're like, as we start our third neighborhood and we didn't really know what the commercial intention of our third neighborhood was going to be, we're like, we have all of this energy, right, that people are bringing and articulating, that we need space. We need the commercial four walls to embody like all of the services that are wellness, right, as we think about health and wellness. And that not only what people want, but how can we take things further, right? And unbeknownst to us for the last 15 years, and we started Motto about 3 or 4 years ago, so 10 years before Motto started, I think whenever you start something with intention and authenticity, you end up falling into something, right? It's not because you just say like, I want to build a wellness community. So unbeknownst to us, right, wellness was absolutely one of the underlying principles of something we were creating in Serenbe. And we were doing it naturally because we have the organic farm. We have 15 miles of walking trails. We have built-in community. We have fresh air. So it was beginning to layer in those services that support that holistic wellness lifestyle and that meet people at all ages where they are. So to your point, from young to old, because one of the key components, not only of community, but of a true wellness community is intergenerational, right? We stay younger, we stay healthier, and we stay happier, right? Much more engaged when we're living amongst people of all ages that we can learn from, that we can be youthful with, that we have all of the ranges. Motto, when built out, will have commercial services ranging from, so today we have a wonderful yoga studio, gym, spin room, integrative holistic doctor, chiropractor, kinesiologist, acupuncturist, dentist, working on a pediatrician. Bamboo Juices has moved their headquarters, so is making cold pressed juice. Pilates reformer studio. We have a vegan skincare line, the spa, and those are just our opening base services that we're offering. So thinking about like many partners who are involved in the health and wellness sector who are looking and seeking for a location that is 20 minutes from an international airport, that is already in a place that already embodies all of like wellness practices, to come further like conversations in people's health journeys, overall health and wellness journeys. And really participating in that conversation. I think 20 to 30 years ago, we societally, especially in America, designated health as like going to the doctor. And now very much shifting is health and wellness is how often are you doing yoga, right? And what type of food are you putting into your body? And how are you taking care of yourself? Like what are those self-care components? And so really having and layering all of that in here.
Makes so much sense. I mean, I love so much of what you said. I mean, it's all sealing the Serenbe legacy. And that pretty much answers one of the questions I had for you about things that you're doing to make sure ensuring this brand outlives you. You've already started, your family's there. I'm just really excited to see where this goes, in the next, I can't imagine what this is going to look like in 10 years. It's only been 3 since I've been. And you guys are saying it's changed so much. What were some of the key essentials to your success at Serenbe? When did you and your family know that Serenbe would succeed? This was a pretty big risk to buy all this land and build on it and assume that people would just come. So what was the parting moment where your dad and mom and you and your sisters knew that Serenbe would succeed?
It's a great question. And I think there are so many answers. I think at any point, without question, Serenbe is a success, right? And at a moment, there have been so many points, right? And I say, so it's almost hard to answer that question because every time we find success, we push further to the point where, and we evolve where people are like, okay, you like achieved that. Are you really going to be able to like achieve this, right? One kind of fundamental answer that I would give is that we're never done, like defining like what success is. Serenbe has come so far in 15 years, and yet we have so much farther to go that I think we would say to you, like, we still have a lot to do. And success is not yet proven, but that's just because we see everything that can be. At the same time, I think where we pass like the litmus test, right, of like people not thinking that we were insane totally, but thinking like, okay, they're still crazy, but they'll probably be able to pull it off, was probably after like Grange, our second neighborhood, had started. I mean, there was definitely that point in Selborne, the first neighborhood, after the first like 30 or 40 houses were complete. It was like, okay, this isn't going to be a total bust, right? Like people are living here. But we went from that with having one bake shop and an art gallery open to saying like, okay, now we're going to like keep pushing and have 20 restaurants and, 50 shops. And we're going to have this whole wellness like neighborhood and people, and, we're going to open a 30,000 square foot wellness commercial building with doctors. Like when we said that about Motto, people were like, what? That is so crazy. That is not gonna, how is that gonna work? Right. And so
that's funny. That is hilarious.
So I think it was probably, like 5 to 6 years in that we earned the credibility to say like, they're still crazy and they may, but I was talking to a neighbor who said to me, like, yeah, when you guys started Motto, I definitely thought, like, you've gone too far, like the success that you saw in Selborne and Grange has just kind of like, you're just taking it too far. This is going to be the point where, like, Serenbe falls down. And it's kind of the exact opposite. It's built on, it's created a level of energy where when people come that they haven't seen Motto, they're like, Serenbe feels so much more. And so all we can see, right, is what 5 to 10 years from now look like when what feels like more now will be even more, right? And people are still like, okay, well, that sounds crazy, But I think that whenever you're a true visionary entrepreneur, and really when you're disrupting a marketplace, right, I would say that Serenbe still today is disrupting the marketplace in terms of real estate development, especially like residential real estate development in the middle of the woods, right, outside of Atlanta. I don't think you're ever done like pushing the envelope and making people question whether you're going to be successful. And, we say at any point if people totally buy in and think that it makes sense and it's safe to do, that we're not dreaming big enough, right? We're not pushing people far enough out of their comfort zone.
That's a great point.
That was an epic point. I'll just say this, and then I'll let Monica say her part. I mean, I love that you said that your friend said you've gone too far, but it's like you said, the opposite. When I saw Motto, I said, no, this is the ceiling moment. Like this is, I mean, they're bringing another hotel. You're not just going to have the inn. You're going to have a hotel. You're going to have a formula for longevity. Blending young and kind of this. Blending young with senior citizens, that's a necessity that most people don't recognize. And then you have all these other moving parts that really moved Serenbe from just a passion project, a personal passion project, to really just like a sustainable, much needed like business model that it's everyone should adapt. Almost every community should adapt. So I immediately saw the vision. So I'm so glad that it's been a success. And what do you think, Monica? I mean, I know you're always a selling point to me, because when I get to Serenbe, you're usually the first person I see, and then you just always have so many updates for me. What are your thoughts?
Well, so I think it's interesting that Garnie says that when somebody says this is too much, she's like, when somebody comes in and says, oh, now I'm on board. Okay, there's more to do. And so I think one of the reasons that probably I was hired is that a lot of the time I would see Steve, he would be finishing a meeting at the Daisy and he would have plans for a hotel in front of him. And he'd be like, oh, do you want to see? And he would share it with me. And so his passion, I had that same dreamer, like, oh, I totally was like, I believe. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that helps. Right. And when you feel that from me, it's because I believe and I see it and I get it. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think it is this sort of audaciousness of the idea and that is so wonderful and optimistic and filled with curiosity and hope. And, and I just think the world doesn't have enough of that. And so I can be a little, I'm always going to be really positive about things and I'll probably put a positive spin on it for you. And that's a benefit for any brand. But I do believe these things are coming. And so how do you lead the marketplace to it? And I think I can do that from a narrative and storytelling of why and try and bring facts and figures and metrics to it. But I think the challenge has been really interesting for me is how it does take the marketplace a long time. Actually, the consumer comes quicker to it than the banks and the investors, because they're looking, and this is, I'm stealing this from Steve, they're looking backwards. And I think the consumer's looking backwards a bit too, but I think there's a lot of people who want, what's the future? How am I going to change my life? What do I want? And they see something in Serenbe about, this is what I want. And so I'm going to move forward into it versus, and again, don't mean to disparage all bankers and investors, but a lot of them look backwards. They want performas and, well, the golf courses worked. Why aren't you putting a golf course in? So what, a farm? That's totally confusing 15 years ago. But now, totally mainstream. And it's almost sort of required to have some type of agriculture or edible into your development. So I think that's been the most interesting thing is to see what I will call the financial marketplace, not just slowly get it. I don't know. I just think that it's unfortunate that more people, because that's the reason there aren't more, because they aren't willing to finance more. And so we continue to hope to be Serenbe, a model that people can point to and say, hey, it's working. So more of them can be built around the world or whatever aspect you want to take of Serenbe, of a better way to build a community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that tagline, a better way to build a community. Again, I mean, it was just so many moving parts. I just remember the water sewer aspect that you guys showed me. We walked by and you said, this is a waste facilitation management. It looks like the most picturesque area of Serenbe. Like it's like a mill behind it. It's like a meadow. And I'm just like, oh, this is so pretty. And oh, really? That's our poo-poo plant, So it's like, but it's genius. And it's not just a pretty waste management facility. There's like some sort of eco-friendly aspect to it. So, I mean, it just, again, a better way to build a community. So Monica, while we're on, I love everything you just said, but tell me, when was your defining moment where you just knew this was the job you were supposed to be doing? Like, I love that you just said that Steve, you would just run into him at the Blue-Eyed Daisy and he would be shuffling his hotel plans and then you kind of just would jump in on it. And, obviously there was some sort of, like you said, you're a dreamer. So where did your moment come, where you just knew that was the job you were supposed to be doing?
I think, I was sort of hired to do this specific thing, which was to help with PR. And I quickly realized that in order to do that well, I needed to figure out how to bring the brand, which was phenomenal, a little bit forward. At the time, it was probably halfway through the life of, 8 years in, and it just, the branding was great, but like the website needed to be changed. And so I think over time I was like, can I just have the budget or can I just do the newsletters too? And can we just, and I think having that trust that, eventually they're like, okay, fine, you just take it. And so it's a combination of, again, a really amazing platform of a brand and story that I was then trusted that I could take the vision and amplify that in a way that could be creative and strategic, but I'm not, running off on my own and, trying to do something that's not real. And so being able to create the newspaper, which was sort of like a group idea of like, hey, we should have this thing that something you can take away when they come here that might tell the story deeper. And so you have a nugget of idea, right, that might come from Steve or come from Garnie or come from our team. And then we get to go do it. Or the podcast, that was something that I really wanted to do with Steve from the beginning of working with him 8 years ago, but it just wasn't something that we had the capabilities of doing. And so then that started really about a year ago, last fall, we launched that. And again, there's this trust of like, okay, I get it. That sounds to make sense, but you just go and do it. And there's a very hands off, there's approvals, but I think that's rare. And that's really lovely for me because I have a lot of autonomy and there's a lot of trust. I can be really creative, but there's also a lot of collaboration. Like, there'll be a nugget or a seed of an idea. And Garnie, I can't think of an example right now, but like Garnie will be like, well, why don't we do this thing? And I'm like, oh yes, like that's like the perfect thing. And then she's like, okay, bye-bye. And we go off and do it. So that's kind of rare, right? A lot of it can be very top down, very heavy handed. So I think that's a huge benefit. And early on, I could feel that with them. So again, sky's the limit, like what's next, right? And so we have a lot of ideas of what we want to do in marketing that will continue to amplify the brand that you probably would never get to do at a big company.
Yeah, that's the winning moment. I think a lot of, to sum up what you said, is timing. Timing, not only with just a position like yours, I've found that in my success as well as a branding person in that space is that timing is everything. You have to find the position that speaks to you. And it sounds like that's what this one did, from where you started. But not only from positioning, but also like building a brand in general. Timelines are super duper important. So what was that timeline like, that process of bringing all the moving parts of Serenbe together? There's so many things like real estate, zoning, taxes, permits, pushbacks, bringing the inn together, the restaurants, one part's commercial, one part's residential. You have art over dinner, artists in residence, Serenbe Playhouse, Serenbe Institute, the list goes on. What was that process of timing like, bringing all these moving parts together?
I mean, I think the genuine answer is that the process is never done. So I think that what we've done really well, or what I think we've done well, and I'm biased, is that we've set a really, really clear foundation and vision for what we want Serenbe to be. And then very much like, as we think about what we want it to be, it's the path forward of vision casting. Okay, 50 to 100 years from now, like, what does that mean? Right. And then backing up from what does that mean and how do you want it to feel to backfill like all of those components. But like the process is never done. Mm-hmm. And the process of like bringing those components together is never done. But we're continually adding into the layers as we look back to like, what's the foundation? What's the intention? What's the container, if you will? Because at any point, like you just look at what we've talked about of everything that's come and opened in Motto in the last like even 18 months, right? Everything that's opened in Motto, so the Pilates Reformer Studio opened and Bamboo Juices opened their storefront and kitchen. Like those are two things that when people are coming and visiting and people who are living here that are already like adding to the components of quality of life in your overall Serenbe experience. And that's just two small examples. But in any year, right, we are hopeful and we plan on adding in and layering in 5 to 10 of those additional moments and components that once they're here, you're like, I can't imagine life without these things, without these parts of Serenbe. So I think that whenever we're dealing with a vision and a place that's so big, right, and is so evolving and has so much hope and so much potential and so much aspiration that it's truly never done. Mm-hmm. But we are where we are today because of where we started in the beginning, right? Of just a very clear, in 2003 when we were setting the intention of what Serenbe could be and what we hoped for the future. and what we wanted as a place. Like, I think really it was that moment that we set the foundation for everything that has unfolded to where we are today.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think both of you have been saying a lot of buzzwords. Moving on to a little bit of societal talk, I'd never been to Georgia before and I didn't know what to expect. I'm not really a Southern boy, but you make people feel welcome, here because it's that foundation, like you said. So how does Serenbe respond to all the recent world issues? I know you've mentioned COVID, but there's another situation that's popped up, and that's all the racial injustices, and who knows what will pop up next. There's just been so many ever evolving. So, and, Serenbe is generally a safe place. That's what you're known for. I've always felt safe there. So how do you respond to these worldly issues when they arise? And why is it so important for communities like Serenbe?
I think it's so important for places like Serenbe as world issues rise, because I think very much we have found ourselves in a place in society where we've lost the ability to have conversations with people. And when I say conversations, I don't mean like going on social media, right? And like hiding behind the screen, more like sitting across the table or standing 6 feet apart, like in a, in a field, and engaging in a thoughtful doesn't mean like you think the same thing, but a thoughtful conversation about disagreeing with each other, about how people see issues and views and perspectives. Serenbe, I believe, has set the foundation and is an example for a place where if we truly live in community where we can have respectful and thoughtful conversations, we're able to move through like a lot of the societal conflicts and components that have risen up. And then we're actually able to move through them in a way where you can find, it doesn't have to be resolution, but you can find an understanding for where somebody else is. And you can do it in a peaceful way where like, you've been opened up to another perspective that is just not possible when you're in like screaming matches on social media and you don't even know the person and you can hide behind the screen, right? Because you don't have accountability. You don't have that eye contact accountability that you do when you're having a conversation with someone. And I think too, Serenbe has said that we at least believe that a true community is when you have a variety of thoughts where people aren't all thinking and believing the same thing. Because I think we're all pushed to have a bigger worldview and perspective if we're around people that have different ideas and have come from a different background and have different thought processes. And I think the other thing that like just kind of the breakdown of the built environment and where we've all found ourselves much more in an online community, we find ourselves in these echo chambers, right? And the echo chambers just kind of exasperate wherever we are instead of pulling us back and saying like, oh, there are like 20 different other perspectives out there that I need to think about and consider that are different than, where I am. And if we understand everybody's perspectives, we can usually then figure out how to come to the common ground. And by the way, the common ground isn't what I believe, right? It's what we like collectively, it's the collective experience versus just like my experience. So that's my very high level answer about the place that Serenbe can play. And I think then we feel safe, and safe not in a way that we avoid conversations, safe not in a way that like real meaningful, difficult work's not happening, but safe in a way where people can feel like they can engage without being an outcast, right? Or without feeling like they're not allowed to have an opinion. So it's a place where people feel safe to have conversations and to be wrong. I think one of the hard things where we are societally now is you're worried about like asking a question or speaking up and being shamed, right? Like if you say the wrong thing, you're like, I can't say anything to say the right thing, to say the wrong thing, creating safe environments where you can ask a question that may come across as naive or ignorant, but somebody's totally willing to engage with you in the conversation to get to that meaningful common ground.
And I think to go back to the built environment, by just not being a gated community, that sets the tone, right? By having mixed use, right? There are shops and there's restaurants and there's events that the public, everyone is invited to. This isn't a only X neighborhood, right? old. It's not all 55 plus. It's not all families. It's not all Black. It's not all white. It's like, and it's not a utopia either. So like, that's the other thing we get, we'll get like, oh, you're an enclave. Oh, you're a utopia. It's like, we're neither. No, there is no such thing as utopia. But I do think the being open, being willing to have conversations, being willing to fail, don't fail too much, but like being willing to fail and get back up and know that if you made a mistake, learn from it, apologize, figure it out, go forward. How do you grow? I think that's a big thing. And I think that's the other thing, whether that's branding or living here or watching it, is, growth is hope and optimism. And I think you only get growth if you're willing to be a little vulnerable, if you're willing to let people in that are different from you, right? Whatever that might be. Yep. And so that, if there is like begin with the end in mind, right? Like, which I think, Steve has, like, he saw that, he sees this fully built out, right? And so for as branding, it's like, what do you want it to look like? And then show that or be that, right? And there's going to be stumbles along the way, but I think that's the key. You can't force it to look a certain way, right? Whether that's a demographic or ages, but you kind of set intention that this is what your hope is, and this is what you'd like to see. And then it does start to come to fruition. Again, not a utopia, but a hope and a vision, again, begin with the end in mind. I think that's a great one in general in whatever work you're doing, and then build into that.
I love that intention word again. And Garnie, you said something, eye contact, accountability. That is the perfect word to sum up why you need to be, why face-to-face meetings are so important. Not too many, and when I say not too many, I mean, Mark Cuban once said, don't meet people unless they're writing you a check. But I disagree with that. I think, I think
we'll work on that. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think it's super important to meet up with people because you really set the tone for the bottom line that you're trying to get to, and I just love that you both gave these amazing forward thinking answers. And I think that's super important, especially for a community where you both live, work, and play. Great, great, great. So before we wrap up, I just have a few more questions, but I want to go back to something interesting that Monica said to me when I first came down. And you said, Serenbe was kind of responsible for Chat Hills getting its own fire and police stations. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So it's super fun and technical answer. So prior to Serenbe starting, we were in, from a zoning perspective, what you would call like an unincorporated area of Fulton County, the county that we're in. And so in that way, we relied on Fulton County for services. Fulton County is the largest county in the state of Georgia. Super fun fact. And we were, before Serenbe really started, this was a very low tax base area. So low tax base in that you have a tremendous amount of land without a lot of homes. So there just wasn't enough tax revenue to be generated for there to be real services here. So if you called 911 for the fire department, right, it could be 20 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, an ambulance could be 45 minutes, those components. We were under the county department, sheriff, and you'd maybe see a car once a month, right? They only came when you actually called the police. When we formed, Serenbe helped lead the effort for the unincorporated area of Fulton County to form as a city, right? And then as a city, we start providing our own services. But even more than that, Serenbe, as we've built out homes, has provided a pretty substantial tax basis. And we now represent probably about 5% of the houses in Chat Hills, but almost 50% of the tax base. And so that tax base allows for paying for a full-time paid police department and fire department that are now 4 miles from here, and people in Chat Hills have comprehensive services. So that's the long-winded answer to your question.
That is, but that's impact, when I just got a fear, I couldn't imagine having to wait 45 minutes for an ambulance or even 30 minutes for a cop car. As a big city dweller, we've gotten so used to, you accidentally dial 911 and they'll show up in 2 minutes. I've dialed 911 before, literally, and they were at my home in 2 minutes. So that is definitely a legacy impact. Pretty much my last question is, What are your top 5 keys to success for building a brand as a sustainable community? I've gotten a few random questions, and it wasn't really, people didn't even know that I had ties to Serenbe, but they were just like, I want to build like a eco-friendly community. Like, do you know anybody that does that? And I'm like, wow, actually, I do. Check out Serenbe. Like, if you're serious, I'll make an intro, because I know you guys have Nygren placemaking and things like that. So tell us, Garnie and Monica, from your perspective of your positions, what would be your top 5 keys to success for building a brand as a sustainable community?
I'll let you start.
I was going to say, that's a great question.
You're like, how much time do you have?
Yeah, how much time? Okay, so top 5, right? Well, number 1, without question, is land plan, right? If I'm coming at it from a technical standpoint, because without the right land plan, without the right flow of spaces and homes and components, you won't end up with a there, right? Number 1. So number 2, from an environmental community, really setting intention behind, like, what are the principles that you care about when you say environmental, so that you can ensure that you're not greenwashing and we're not environmental washing. And you don't have to do all the things, but what are the things, either that when it comes into the environment, what's needed in the area that you're building out, right? What does your local, like, city and state support in terms of tax credits, and just what is feasible based on the market that you're building out in? So number 3 that goes along with, that isn't land planning, but is design, is a great architectural team to create like streetscapes. So one of the things that we have found is that we can move the needle environmentally because Serenbe is beautiful, right? Because it feels good to be here. And so we're leading people into, you don't have to give up beauty in your life to think about how to incorporate environmental components and what you're doing and how you're changing your life. So many people think that, like, to live an environmental lifestyle, it means you have to kind of like give up things, right? Give up the aesthetic and the beauty and the luxury. And that's, as Tesla has showed us, that's the exact opposite, right? Number 4 is, figure out where you're pushing the envelope, right? Where you're not being safe, and do it and commit to it. And kind of say to yourself from the outset that you're going to get pushback and it's going to be hard, but that you're not going to, define the things that you're not going to compromise on, because you're going to have to compromise on some things. And then number 5, I think, is just of a key ingredient is a gut check of why you're doing it, right? Like, so I think that whenever you're doing something, it's okay for one of the reasons that you're doing something to make money, right? But if that's the leading component, then number 1 through 4 won't happen that I just listed, because you'll compromise on all of them across the board to meet like what we as a society considers to be financial viability, which is usually like very short-term gain. And what we're talking about is more in a 10 to 20 year thought process. So that's what I would say would be my 5 key ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Monica? You got anything to add, or did Garnie just pretty much sum it up?
I think mixed use is really important, and that might be part of how you're setting intention. But I think having shops and restaurants mixed in with townhouses and homes and, what we call estates or farmettes, having that mix and not having them be siloed on the property, I think is important. And then I think there are these like wonderful placemaking details that are here that I think are important, like obviously sidewalks or the curbs or granite curbs, the way that all of our mail, we don't have mailboxes at each house. The mail is centralized, and that creates like energy. When people go get the mail, they see each other, and that creates community. There are like little benches and pocket areas that are placed throughout the community, even though we have tons of green space. Those little places of intention bring people together. And then I think that there is also, you can't really talk about Serenbe without the agriculture component, without the farm. And so really thinking about how important farms are in general, and local agriculture, organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture. How do you incorporate that somehow into your development or community? Because that soil health is your health. And so that's super important for wellness. And then figuring out probably how do you set intention to bring arts and culture into the community in some form. And again, if money is your only goal, you are going to give on a lot of these things because they feel like extras and they feel like amenities, but they are integral to making a place like Serenbe.
Absolutely, because otherwise you just become like a green space or utopia, like you said, or wannabe utopia, but then there's no purpose-driven action behind it. So, I just love everything that you both said, from the details to knowing and reminding yourself of your why. I mean, I think that's all super important. We covered so many gems today.
I was going to say, I'd add one last thing is that I think what Steve says a lot, which I think is interesting, is when people think about building something like Serenbe, is think about it as a town rather than a development. Even though you're not technically building one, that thing, at least for me, is something that really is meaningful and does invite everybody in and does all the things that you talk about. What kind of town would you want to build?
Right. Towns have soul, developments you just live in, Yeah, so I think that's a good way to sum that up, like exponentially. Well, we've covered a lot of gems today, ladies. This was good. I'm just so glad that, you brought it. I know there's so much to discover at Serenbe, and I think just taking this deeper dive into just the operation side and the brand management and marketing side is just going to be super duper helpful. It's been very informative to me to get to know what it's like to not only to start a community like this, but also operate and build it from the ground up. And I just know this is going to be such a virtuous opportunity for someone out there to learn and to really just make change in their community, just like you've done right in your backyard in the Chattahoochee Hills. It's been very informative to me, and there's so many moving parts to making this place a success. And I'm just so grateful that you shared that with me today.
Well, we look forward to having you back.
I will be back sooner than later.
Good. Thanks for asking us to be on.
Of course. It's been my pleasure.
Yep.
Well, we're excited to have you back, and again, sooner rather than later.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies.
Bye.
That was Monica Olsen and Garnie Nygren, Serenbe's Chief Marketing Officer and COO, joining us here today on Building a Better Brand. Kicking it back with me to discuss, as you've heard, what it's like to build a sustainable wellness community and the journey they've taken to get exactly to where they are today. What I love about doing this show is that all of my guests come from different walks of life, but we're all on this journey together. And even if I'm not in the specific industry or market, I still learn something that is so crucial from each and every one of my guests. Be sure to follow Serenbe, SERENBE, across all their social channels. And of course, I'll make sure all of those links are active and in our show notes below. I know I've learned a lot, and it's very much motivated me on my own entrepreneurial journey as we all continue to build together, connect, and thrive as we grow in this world of building better brands. Follow us on Instagram and across all social media platforms at Building a Better Brand. Follow me, your host, Tony Triumph, on Instagram. I'm at Tony Triumph Official. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter if you want to drop me a line. I'm trying to get more active on those platforms. Or, if you have any brand-related questions, requests, or even feedback about this podcast, feel free to hit me up at info@buildingabetterbrand.com. Till next time, y'all.